Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to look at Cowboys From Hell on the Helix, and we'll hear some snippets below. Just before we look into recreating this together, guys, just to let you know, if you want to save your 15 minutes and support the channel, I've got the patch for download on my website. So yeah, let's look into it. We're going to start with the rhythm tone that covers the majority of the song. When I start building a patch, I start with the amp. What you want to do is get your single amp to the point where the distortion and the EQ is most of the way towards the sound you're chasing. If you get the amp halfway and then you start trying to modify that with later EQ blocks or reverbs or modulation, anything like that, you will find that you're always fighting that initial sound. You got to get the amp distortion and EQ roughly right before you look at anything. And so the amp that I was able to get the gist of the Cowboys From Hell sound was with the Line 6 electric amp. The Line 6 electric is a Line 6 original amp, so it doesn't look like it was modeled after a real life amp. It's also got thunder and lightning on it, so I assume it was inspired by Dimebag sound. To me, it sounds like it pretty Dimebaggy out of the box. And so, you know, with some modifications, mainly the EQ, we're going to want to pull the mids out, which is a very Dimebag typical sound. Gain it to the moon. We'll take some bass out and push our trebles and presence and that. Oh, also you want to take your sag out because that tightens up the sound a bit. You don't want any sag. And yeah, you can just take a moment there to pause and look at the amp settings and recreate that. This isn't going to be 100% of the way there, but you'll see what I mean. Like you want like 80-90% of the feeling of the song you're chasing. So let's give this a little listen. So yeah, that's not perfect, but to me that's, you know, a good start. And especially when you scroll through and you're clicking on all the different amps, I was finding that was just the best starting point. It was the thing that just out of the box was the closest to my ears. So the next thing we're going to look at is the other amp. Generally, when making patches that are recreating famous songs, most of the time when they were recorded, the artist layer the guitars. So they'll record the same riff a bunch of times to make it sound thicker. They'll often record it into different amps. This splits here. This top bit is A, this is B. This second loop here. That is going into an amp that sounds similar. And we can listen to that by itself. Again, you're going to want to roughly get this to sound like what you're after. A lot of gain, not a lot of bass. Take the mids out, push the trebles and presence, take out the sag. That's all the most important stuff. And then you can just copy the rest of it as you see it there. But yeah, you want to be most of the way there. It sounds like this. So yeah, both of those amps individually sound approximately like the sound we're going for. Not bang on, but you know, roughly. We're going to go back to the mixer and set the volumes back to 0. So now this is the two amps at the same time. You see that sounds pretty good. Also, another thing to talk about is in front of the second amp, we've got a double take block. And what the double take does is it makes an imperfect copy of what you play. So it'll adjust the timing slightly. And what that does is if we feed that into the B amp, the second amp, and then we remove the dry level, that removes out what we're actually playing. We leave on the wet level, that is the imperfect version of what we play. So if you think of it this way, our actual playing goes into this amp in line A, channel A, and then B comes here, and then it hits this imperfect take thing, and then that basically turns it into a very similar but not the same take, and that runs into amp B. And that kind of replicates what they do in the studio. It's like, you know, instead of us recording it twice, we're just going to set it up like this so it sounds like what we get in the studio. And then that all funnels back into the mixer here, and we're going to pan the first amp halfway to the left and the B amp halfway to the right. All again just to emulate what happens in the studio. The next thing we're going to look at is the noise gate, and I'm just going to show you the kind of verses. This is where you'll hear that this is really important. So without the noise gate, we're getting this. If we turn this on, you'll notice that just sounds a lot tighter. Because Dimebag has a very kind of tight, fast sound. It takes some of the sloppy feeling out of it. In the same way that we take the sag out of the amps, it just gets everything sounding faster, tighter, more accurate. So now moving on away from the amps, we're going to come down here to the next part of the chain. We're going to enable our EQ. And to me, this is what gets it a lot of the way there. This is the difference from it kind of sounding a little bit like Dimebag to, in my ears, a lot. So let's just look at it with and without. And now let's enable this and you'll see what I mean. And to me, that's getting a lot closer to what sounds like him, especially when you listen to it in the context of the full song. After the EQ, we have got a chorus pedal, and important note on everything after the amps, actually, I should point out, you want the stereo mode. Because when we used the mixer, we've essentially enabled stereo mode from here onwards. So that we've got left and right pan, you see. So hitting the EQ, make sure it's in stereo mode, or else you'll lose a lot of what makes this sound the way it is. The chorus, also stereo mode, will enable that now. An important note on this, the mix is low. We don't want this to be overly obvious, but still kind of there. The pedal that Dimebag actually used is in the Helix, the script mod Phase 90. You'll see that this is it here. It is based on the MXR Phase 90. You could use that if you prefer. I just prefer the chorus. What I don't like about the Phase 90 is it kind of moves around slowly and it changes the sound over time. The chorus just kind of always sounds the way it is, but it still gives the stereo feeling. So yeah, I know it's a bit, I guess, sacrilegious to go against what Dimebag picks, but you can pick it if you want the pedal he used there. Just do something similar. Set the mix to 20, 30%. Don't have it overbearing. But yeah, let's listen to without. And then with it on. So yeah, it's just another little thing that gets you closer in my ears to that song. So yeah, that's the core of the sound, guys. We'll do one lap of the blocks now, one more time, just in case I missed any of them. I'll pause on each of them for just a second and you can have a look at the settings. Use the space bar if you need to stop and copy my settings. It's the input gate. This is the hard gate. One very fast gate to catch all those in-between notes on the chugs, I guess, on the verse. Again, the look at the EQ, the gain, and the sag, those are all quite important, I guess, if you want to replicate everything. And you can look at the mic here. And then down into B's settings. This is the double taker. Important to get that dry level fully off. This is the Rev Gen B amp. And the miking for the Rev Gen B amp. Into the mixer. We've got half panning, not full panning. I don't really like full panning. and then both are zeroed out, and there's your volume. This is even split. We didn't look at this, by the way, the splitter. Yeah, and then this is the thing that sends it to the next line. It's all default. The EQ is like this. We're cutting off the bassy bass. Dimebag had a pretty thin tone, so we cut out a lot of the bass. A little push on this one though, to give it some meat. And then we fall down dramatically again in the middle, the mids, because he's a very cut out the mids kind of guitar tone. And then we've got slightly pushed highs at 4K and 8K. And there you go, you can just copy all that. The chorus settings. And we'll get back to the rest of the blocks as we look at the other snapshots. So now moving on to snapshot 1. We were looking at snapshot 2, which is the main, bulk of the song kind of tone. We've got snapshot 1 because, we come in on the quiet part. So let's look at what's different here. We don't change the input. The gate's the same. Nothing changes there. So the only thing that changes on the amp per snapshot is the mids. Right now we still have 0 on the mids. Those push a bit on the solo, but we'll look at that when we're looking at snapshot 3. Double take is the same. The mids again are zeroed out, but will push on the solo, and nothing then changes throughout the rest of the blocks until we get to this separate EQ block. And what the purpose of this is it cuts out some bass and some treble at the extremes. And the reason we do this is it'll make it sound really small, and it'll allow when we drop into snapshot 2 and this turns off, it'll just fill up the sound that bit more and make the drop heavier if we have this on at first. So yeah, you can hear this here. Okay, so that's the quiet part. Let's look at the solo. Solo is snapshot 3. We will do a quick loop through the blocks again. What's changed? The gate turns off. I'll turn off my volume here actually because the gate's off. The reason we turn off the gate is because if you leave it on, it might choke out some of your harmonics or long-held solo notes. So it just interferes with the solo. So we don't want the gate on in the solo. As we talked about earlier, the mids get pushed a lot in the solo, and that just brings it to the center of attention. Looking at line B, we get the same thing. The mids pushed, exact same logic. And then the only other thing that changes is the reverb block comes on. You can copy the settings here if you take a moment. And just another thing to note is this low and high shelver reducer thing, that's turned off on snapshots 2 and 3. So we don't want this on in the solo either. But yeah, sounds like this. So yeah, that's the solo tone, guys, and that's basically the whole patch with that. If ye have ideas for next songs for me to have a look at, please let me know. I'd love to take some comments and use some of your ideas. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Cheers.